Jeff Sessions and Donald Trump are ripping an average of about 50 children, just a few less, a day away from their parents at the border. And so repugnant is this policy, so odious to basically everyone's moral intuitions. The president and his allies keep lying about why they're doing this or that they're doing it. Today, though, a U.S. attorney from Texas admitted that, yes, it is the administration's choice to be this cruel.
We are following the law. I mean, there's many people who...
But let's remember also, you can follow the law in a different way. Previous administrations have. This is a policy choice.
Well, it is a policy choice by the president and by the attorney general.
Congressman Beto O'Rourke visited several immigration facilities in McAllen, Texas this week, and he joins me now. Congressman, the facilities you visited, my understanding, at least some of them, are different than the kind of longer-term shelters for children that ORR is running. These are kind of processing intake facilities run by Customs and Border Patrol. What did you see there?
Well, I went to the Border Patrol station in McAllen, Texas, which is the busiest station in the busiest Border Patrol sector along the 2,000 miles of the U.S.-Mexico border. And that's where families, mothers in this case, and their young children are brought after they are arrested, trying to cross in between the ports of entry. And I should make clear, those Border Patrol agents that I met along with those families are doing the toughest jobs that I can imagine. And they tell me that those young mothers and children are turning themselves in, not trying to flee or evade detection. They are turning themselves into those Border Patrol agents. But that's where I met a 27-year-old mother, her 7-year-old child. They just made the 2,000-mile journey from Honduras, had been arrested hours before, and unbeknownst to them, they were about to be separated. And Chris, I will never forget seeing that 7-year-old girl clutching her mother's hand, as she must have been for the last 3 weeks in 2,000 miles of that journey. And just as they thought they had reached safety and asylum and refuge, that little girl was about to be taken away from her mother. The next place I went was a Border Patrol processing center in McAllen, where behind those cyclone fence cages, we saw in 20 by 20 foot pods dozens upon dozens of children sleeping on these polished concrete floors, on slim mattresses with Mylar blankets, men who had been separated into their own pods, women into theirs. I went to the International Bridge, where I met asylum seekers who were trying to cross into the U.S. and do this lawfully, and were being turned away by Customs and Border Protection, thereby providing an incentive for them to try to cross in between ports of entry illegally. And the last place I went was a privately run detention center by the GEO Corporation in the Rio Grande Valley, where I met a young man who had fled Guatemala with his 12-year-old daughter, whom he had not seen for the last 5 days. This is what we are doing right now in the United States, and I was able to see all of that for myself.
Okay, there's a few things I want to follow up on. One really crucial point. The position of Jeff Sessions, the Department of Justice, and prosecutors is that it is illegal to present yourself for asylum if you do not go through a port of entry. That is arguable, I should say. It's not clear that's what the law says. But stipulating that for a second, what you're saying is when people try to do it legally and come through a proper port of entry to present themselves for asylum, they are being turned away.
They're being told that we do not have capacity and to come back at another time. I met 2 asylum seekers from Guatemala who, by the time they'd reached Reynosa, which is just on the other side of McAllen in Mexico, they were kidnapped, held for 12 days without their clothes for ransom, which totaled $7,500, upon which they were released, made their way to the International Bridge, and were not allowed to petition for asylum in the U.S. and were scared to death, literally, of going back to Reynosa, where they might get picked up again by the cartels. When I asked that 27-year-old mother with her 7-year-old child, why did you not cross at the ports of entry and do this lawfully? She said, tenía miedo. I was scared. I didn't know where to cross. A Border Patrol agent pulled me aside and he said, you know what, Beto? She had no choice in where she crossed. The cartels, they control all of the crossings. They decide who goes in between the ports of entry and who goes to the ports of entry. And at the end of the day, why are we prosecuting this young mother like a common criminal for doing what any single one of us would do for our own kids in the same situation? Let us allow her to petition for asylum. If she meets the credible fear test, then there's a process for us to allow her to continue to stay in this country. If she does not, she will be sent back to her country of origin. Those are our laws. They're the way that they're intended to work. We should allow them to do so. Right now, we are doing something so inhumane, so un-American, that I'm ashamed. But it's now on all of us. This is who we are. This is what we're doing as a country. We now have the opportunity to act.
The White House, the president, and others are lying about what they're doing. They are not admitting that this is a prosecution initiative that they have created. Jeff Sessions has been a bit more honest. People in Customs and Border Patrol know what they're doing, right? They understand this is a new policy they're putting in effect, and they started going to work one day where their job now included taking children from parents, right?
I met with somebody in Customs and Border Protection who has the job description of consequence delivery, which sounds like something Orwell would have come up with. And she was sharing with me that child who's just been separated from that parent are both assigned what is known as an A number. As a family group, they're assigned a number as well. And that's for the purposes of the Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection. But that mother is about to be sent to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution, then to ICE in their enforcement and removal operations. That child becomes property of Health and Human Services and the Office of Refugee and Resettlement specifically. And so I asked this woman, so what happens to those A numbers and the family unit numbers? Do those track through DOJ and HHS? And she said, I don't know. So we have no idea when or if mother and child will be reunited. More importantly, that mother and that child have no idea when they're going to be reunited. I cannot imagine anything more terrifying for that kid or for that mom who's just risked and sacrificed everything to bring her daughter to safety, and now we take her away from her.
Let me make sure. So it is an open, what I hear from you is that it's an open question whether there's a central database that at least stores the matching numbers between the parents and the children we're ripping away from them. It is unclear whether that information is stored centrally across the different agencies that are managing the parents and the kids.
The people that I've spoken with in Customs and Border Protection cannot answer the question. The pro bono attorney with whom I visited that father in the privately run detention center later that night said she had been calling the 1-800 number that she had been given to see if she could help that father find his 12-year-old daughter. They've been looking for 5 days and cannot make the connection. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but a member of Congress, somebody who's in charge of a processing center in the busiest Border Patrol sector in the country, an attorney who's working for a client, none of us have been able to find the answer. This is because, in part, my belief, this is brand new for the United States of America, at least in my lifetime. I thought we didn't do things like this. We're not prepared to do things like this, but in fact, we're doing things like this not too far from my hometown where I'm raising my 11, 9, and 7-year-old. We're building a tent city. There are already 100 kids in Tornillo, and it's 100 degrees in El Paso in June, and they're going to be there, we think, at a minimum for 2 months, but the reality is no one knows. And the lasting consequence and terror of being taken away from your parents in a strange land and not knowing if you're ever going to be connected, that will be with them for the rest of their lives. That will be with us as a country for the rest of our lives. And it is now on us to do everything within our power to make this right. And that's what I'm committed to, and that's what I know a lot of good people in this country are committed to. I think we can still get this right. We still have time.
All right, Beto O'Rourke, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.